Do you do any modelling these days?
Well, I assume by that you mean railway modelling. Yeah, I do. I do on and off. I suppose the weird thing is that my modelling sort of days, as they say, started off when I was very, very young. I started off railway modelling with, I suppose, being given an 00 gauge model train set, a little Hornby 00 clockwork locomotive called Timmy, somewhat bizarrely. They made when I was about sort of 3 years old, and all the stuff from my grandfather. But I matured very quickly from 00 gauge to gauge 1. And that's because I lived very close to Beaconscott Model Village when I was a child. And from the age of about 11, I then got employed by Beaconscott to go and help run their model railway. And if I'm sure some of the listeners are also viewers to this will actually know that the Beaconscott has got around about 10 scale miles of gauge 1 track in this massive, sort of acre and a half of model scenery. And it's fully signalled throughout with semaphore signals, and colour light signals with interlocked signalling equipment from London Underground and British Rail. So I went from sort of 00 gauge stuff right up to gauge 1 by the age of about 12, 13. And that was quite exciting because suddenly you're given this opportunity to go, wow, actually, these are big. These things you can tuck under your arm, and walk about with them. Now, I had a brief foray, I have to say, into N-gauge and 009 for a little while, when I was probably in my late teens, before university, when I had a big 00 gauge train set, and I built a feeder sort of line. And actually then I built an N-gauge route, again, because I was so interested in different scales and models and how they fit together, having all the different stuff. I had a model railway sort of museum as part of my model railway. And as that, I had a miniature railway and a ride-on railways. So I actually ran at the time, I have actually still got it, I've got an N-gauge 125 set, which I ran effectively as being a 15-inch gauge, in theory, sort of style model around the top of this railway. So I was running it as a miniature railway with model people on the outside of it. And in recent years, I've actually bought a T-gauge train set, which of course I'm sure a lot of you will know is 3mm gauge. So whilst it's fair to say I don't have an active model railway in London where I live, because I live in a relatively small flat. We have 2 bedrooms and one's a study that we rent this flat, and I can't really easily build a model train set. And this time of life at the moment, I've got too much else going on at weekends than building model railways. I have collected stuff, and my goodness, I have been collecting model railways. And I say I've amassed in recent years. I don't know why I've bought them. I wanted to buy a whole set of. I saw this set for sale. There was an N-gauge set of container wagons, some 1980s container wagons with a Class 58. I always wanted them in 00 gauge, but I saw it. There's a very good value set I saw for sale. I'll get that. So I've got this collection of N-gauge container wagons into Class 58. I've got must be a couple of dozen 00 gauge locomotives. G-gauge we've got in the flat as well. The G-gauge then has also gone to the office where I work. We're currently rebuilding the office as at this current time. Where are we now? This is early June we're talking about this. Rebuilding the office. We've got G-gauge in the office, which goes around our kitchen, round the ceiling. I've put in place. And that's been put in to, so on a Friday afternoon we can deliver drinks around the kitchen, and other times whizzes round at lunchtime just to amuse the rest of the staff, because there are sort of 400 of us in the office in normal times. It's quite fun to have a train set to play with in the office. Yeah, I keep buying stuff. So one day I will eventually get the stuff out and put it down on a baseboard, rather than down on the floor and just collect fluff for a few days while whizzing it around on the floor, which I've been told off for many, many times by people on social media. Stop putting it on the floor.
Yes. Yes. Do you see N-gauge as being sustainable in the long term?
Well, for me, it's got an interesting part to play, because a lot of my friends have got N-gauge. And what I like about model railways particularly is how social they can be. I love having railways as things to share. So whilst I've got lots of 00 gauge stuff, and G-scale stuff, and I've amassed these things, and indeed Engage. I think the reason I've got these things isn't to build necessarily my own model railway. What I enjoy most of all is having friends who have their own model railways, and I have stock that I can take to them. And that means, for me, Engage is the same. So having my little Class 58 in my stock, my friend Gareth Dennis up in York said to me last week when he came down to stay, he was like, oh, I said, oh, come on. He said, bring your stuff up to me. I can't come like, next time you come see my wife, you two bring your model trains up too. So it's quite fun, I think, having different model trains that you can take with you to go into different friends, whatever their train set, and go and enjoy their hobby and take it with you. So I think that's probably what I'll keep on doing. I think I'll probably build up a small collection of 009, bit of Engage. You know, I desire a little Gronk perhaps, and some mineral wagons, 16-ton mineral wagons, I think as well. You know, a little carry case. Take a holiday up to Yorkshire with me and down to my friends in Wales who've got their own Engage train set. I mean, why not? What could be more fun than sharing your hobby with some of your best friends?
I mean, that's very similar to being a member of a club. In fact,
absolutely. And
share.
I think that's why I love the existence of model railway clubs as ongoing. I think they are. I think they're wonderful organisations. My grandfather was a founder member of one in Ickenham in West London back in the 1950s or 40s rather. And I think that stuck with me. This idea that people can share a hobby together. No matter how introvert or extrovert you are, it's a chance to share a beautiful, lovely thing and share your hobby with others, and that can only be stronger. And I love that.
And model railways and railways in general have been a bit of a taboo subject in the general public. I think that's changing.
Massively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think that I think once it was perhaps 10, 20 years ago, people laughed at train spotting and they laughed at model railways. I think that has changed. I think that there are a few of us who've made a concerted effort to change that. I did train spotting live with the idea that I wanted to change perceptions of it, and I went on the offensive with media before and after it, and I championed it through television and radio and magazines and newspapers. And I got quite grumpy with journalists who took them on a journey as well, I think. And if you can show some enthusiasm with something, and if you can show genuine joy, and you can show what is so much fun, I think people will come along with you. And I think that's what's happened. I think people have gone, do you know what? These people aren't all necessarily mad. Some of us are a bit mad, and that's all right too. But actually, there is wonder and joy and craftsmanship and happiness in our hobby. I think those that knock it perhaps sometimes might look back a second time and go, oh, maybe I was wrong. These people have got something here. I wonder what it is. And it's nice to see people coming back to the hobby again, I think. Or starting it for the first time. It's a real joy to see.
You're very full of enthusiasm. I mean, what drives that enthusiasm?
I've always wanted to. I always looked at the world and thought, if you approach something with enthusiasm, you'll probably get more out of it. I think if you approach something thinking, oh, this isn't very exciting. If you approach something assuming it's going to be boring, I think with a negative view, I think probably you might not get so much out of it. Approach it with enthusiasm, and I think you'll probably enjoy it more.
Okay, I'm a bit conscious of time, and we're running out of time. So can I finish off with just one final question for you then? And it relates to your architecture of the railway series. What's your favourite station? And Mike and I have had a bit of a bet on this. And we're both completely different at different ends of the scale. So we're interested to see what you say here.
That's really my favourite station. Good Lord, I've been asked this question a few times, and every single time I change my mind. And I've got a few minutes left to answer this question. Oh, my favourite station. Which one am I going to choose this time round? Do you know, my favourite station, I don't know who even featured it. It isn't even architecturally. I love, I'm going to fudge this. I've got a few. I'm going to fudge this just a bit annoying. I love Baker Street in London, because Baker Street for me is to me kind of the home of the underground. And as a junction station, I could spend, and indeed I have spent hours, with staff and by myself, nosing around Baker Street into its most, unusual parts. And the history of Baker Street is remarkable. As the heart of Metroland, and above ground, the old headquarters of the Metropolitan Railway. I find fascinating. I have absolute deep love for Bristol Temple Meads. Again, a former, still a junction station to some degree, and again, a station that on the face of it looks a bit of a mess. Unpick all those different parts of it, and there's a reason, there's a method in that madness, and that is genuinely fascinating. And one that might, again, I often say, I always put St Pancras to one side and say that's something so bizarre, so bonkers, so completely outlandish. Everyone loves it. I actually love Euston. And I love Euston for what it once was and what it could have been. And I think it is much maligned. I think people dislike Euston, not because of what it is now. I think people dislike it because of what it replaced. And I think people think, they think, oh, the arch, it's all the fault of the current station. I think if it wasn't for the demolition of the previous one, people would like Euston an awful lot more. I think that underneath a lot of the rubbish that Euston is currently covered in, there is a wonderful piece of modernism that is just waiting to get out. And I think its purest form, Euston is a wonderful building.
Yeah.
Well, that's us both lost.
Want to know what we said?
Yeah, go on.
Well, I said a Tosha station in Madrid.
Wonderful. Yep.
And,
Okay.
and what really drew me to it was the turtles in the foyer there, which is brilliant. I think it's just something so interesting, and the sort of tropical garden they've got there, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll buy that actually. In fact, actually, I was going UK only. Tosha, I think, is a genuine wonder. You're right. Done to it in recent years is extraordinary. Mike, what did you go for?
No, I don't think this is fair. I think you've been persuaded him now. I was a little bit mundane in mine. I said Wednesday.
And why that?
I think because I've been there, and your enthusiasm in the documentary, I thought was very fitting for it. Okay, and there's been a lot of time and effort put into bringing it back to life as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Again, a lovely building, several buildings there. I think one thing about the architecture program is that we always try and find buildings or structures or locations in the program that that you wouldn't necessarily have noticed before or wouldn't have heard of before. Some of us might have loved them and known of them because we've travelled to them or been to preserve railways, but the general population might not have heard of or seen or kind of gone round. And so it's always enjoyable to go and find places that aren't necessarily, and the reason I say Euston and Baker Street are because they're not what I would call traditionally attractive stations. What's interesting are the stories behind them. And that's what makes a good story to me. And I find, and for me, it's the buildings that are compelling with a great story, rather than necessarily what looks beautiful, or is, and that's what gives to me a good story and makes them my favourites. I think. To look at, again, St Pancras is one of the most glorious petrol stations in the UK, and I've even seen like Great Malvern, for example. And what a lovely country station that is. It's a fascinating place, but I think that the stories to me are more fascinating in places like Euston, where there's a deeper, bigger rationale behind it. But yeah, we're very lucky to get these places for the programme. And actually, the Series 3 comes out towards, a bit later on this year, and we filmed Series 3 of architecture. We may yet film even more, who knows? But it's interesting, trying to find railway stations for Series 3. We could film sort of during lockdown for a lot of it. So we had to be very careful where we filmed and how we filmed it. So slightly restricting what we could and couldn't do. So you'll see some even more probably slightly sort of left field stuff coming up, and stations you probably never thought you'd see featured on a television programme or be in Series 3. But the stories are no less compelling and no less wonderful.
Right. Well, we're running out of time, so I'll have to unfortunately bring this to an end. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Engage Forum for taking time to talk to us. It's been very much appreciated, and thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Brilliant.